Welcome, everyone, to Archetypes in the News for December 8th, I believe, 2019. Time is flying by, and so are the events. Today, I'd like to explore Nancy Pelosi's chart and Donald Trump and the multivalence of the Saturn-Pluto archetypal complex that we see clearly in both of their natal charts and is being kind of brought to prominence by the Saturn-Pluto conjunction in the sky right now. And it could be very instructive to take a look at both of their charts, the transits, and what's taking place right now. I'd like to start with this quote from Noam Chomsky on the 2020 election. He says, "I find it psychologically impossible to discuss the 2020 election without emphasizing as strongly as possible what is at stake. Survival, nothing less. 4 more years of Trump may spell the end of much of life on Earth, including organized human society in any recognizable form. Strong words, but not strong enough." And I'm in agreement with Noam Chomsky. He is basing this on the idea that the Republican Party and Donald Trump are basically the most dangerous organization for organized life on the planet at the moment, in that their climate denial orientation and approach to climate crisis. So this is the origin of his statement here, and I believe he's actually correct with that. And I'd like to start, with this iconic image, which I believe encapsulates what is ultimately taking place right now. We are witnessing the psychological meltdown of Donald Trump and the consequences of his inability to see himself critically, to engage in critical self-reflection, and his shadow projection as a result. And what will ultimately be a consensus confrontation with the shadow dimension of his corrupt psychology that he has now projected onto the entire world and is being reflected back to him through the process of impeachment. And I believe this is going to be highly instructive for the rest of us as to how we engage with our own personal unconscious and how we relate to each other and hold space for each other, hold each other to account for how we're participating in reality. So without further ado, Nancy Pelosi's amazing, incredibly powerful chart we'll explore briefly. She is born with the sun at 5 degrees Aries and a tight trine to Pluto. This is the empowerment of the solar dimension of her being, the power to take on political struggles and to be empowered to do so, and the intensity and drive to stay focused on what's important in her life. She's also born with an extremely tight Saturn square Pluto from 0 Taurus to 0 Leo, which is she's born just after the beginning of World War II, with the same Saturn-Pluto conjunction that corresponded to World War II. And what Saturn and Pluto combination has a wide range of complex manifestations. And in Nancy Pelosi's chart and many other people who embody it in this way, what happens is Pluto intensifies the Saturnian moral conscience, the superego, our sense of right and wrong, our morality. And when Pluto intensifies it in a positive way, it strengthens the moral structure. It gives us more backbone, gives us more moral courage and strength to stand up, to have a stronger Saturnian foundation for what is right, for what is correct, for what is true. Of course, can all be negotiated, but Saturn represents consensus reality, and that's the way it is ultimately realized through our consensus relationships. And if you didn't catch it just recently, Nancy Pelosi yesterday was called out by a reporter for suggesting that she may hate Donald Trump, and she very clearly and very succinctly stressed that she did not hate anyone, and it comes from her Catholic upbringing, and it is very authentic what she is saying. I know many people are saying this isn't the case, that she's politicking or whatever, but it's absolutely the case that she is a deeply morally grounded, centered person, and it is probably one of the most centered places from which she draws her strength to do what she does in standing up to the corruption in our politics today. Now, when I saw her make this statement, I actually was thinking to myself, I was like, wow, when Trump hears this, he's not even going to be able to believe this. Like, in his mind, he will think that that's a lie and that Nancy is just saying that to make him look bad. And it turns out he tweeted within an hour or two saying almost exactly that. Like, he didn't believe that she prayed for him and that it was, farcical and whatnot. But my point is that and then Pelosi in the town hall the next day said, yeah, when you see Trump saying that he doesn't believe that I don't pray for him, that's probably because he doesn't pray. And that's exactly right. So what we're all seeing is Trump projecting his shadow onto other people. He's been doing this from day one. It is becoming clearer and clearer as the grip, the tightening, the contractional forces are tightening upon his reality, his delusional reality that is being encroached upon by the actual reality, which is he is guilty of violating his oath of office and will be impeached for it. And I know I'm a bit on my soapbox at the moment, but two things are going to happen. He's either going to also be convicted in the Senate, or the Republicans will go down in history as enabling the worst president in history, knowing that he had both corrupted the democratic process and endangered our national security strictly for his personal gain. Those are the facts. That's what history will record, and the Republicans have a choice to either go down with that history or stand up and do the right thing. Facts matter. They're going to be recognized by history. We're in a brief moment in time at this present time where it seems as though facts are somewhat negotiable because we've had an assault on the truth from the top by not only Donald Trump, but it actually originates from Vladimir Putin. And I've been putting this in my post for a long time, hashtag still colluding. It's definitely the case. Donald Trump, whether wittingly or unwittingly, is colluding and purveying the actions and will of Vladimir Putin. And not only that, it's spread into some of our leading Republican senators and congressmen, clearly. So all of that aside, in my little soapbox, what's really great about Pelosi's transits is that this is her transits on the outside, her natal chart on the inside. And right now, Jupiter just moved into the sign of Capricorn. And through the month of December, it will move closer and closer into a square with her natal sun at 5 Aries, which is supportive. It's a square, it's supportive. She is being empowered and honored and given, a supportive strength to take on Trump and his corruption. The other thing that's happening is that there's a Saturn-Pluto conjunction, as we all know, that is also bringing this confrontation with the truth and the morality and confrontation with the shadow all into our present experience right now. And Saturn happens to be square to her natal Jupiter right now, which is really great for just social justice, fairness in court cases and court action, legal action, that type of thing, which she has demonstrated a tremendous amount of fairness. She clearly did not want to impeach him. She was forced to because of Trump's corrupt actions that were unavoidable, were completely unconstitutional, and would made it beyond her duty if she did not actually impeach him. It was a constitutional responsibility for Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats to impeach Donald Trump. Those are the facts. Now, what's also really interesting is that if you go back to her natal chart, I'm often criticizing Donald Trump for his delusions, the pathological lying that's taking place, and I associate that with the challenging nature are it's, I don't want to say, I mean, it's his negative embodiment of a Mercury Neptune square. Mercury square Neptune can be incredibly brilliant. Bob Dylan, Mercury square Neptune, genius. Who else? Howard Stern has Mercury square Neptune. He is not delusional. Again, Nancy Pelosi, Mercury opposite Neptune, clearly not delusional. She has a spiritual orientation. She has an empathic, compassionate, intuitive mind that is focused in many ways on the higher principles. Neptune, what's right and what's wrong, and she has a very deep compassion for children and the like. So you can see really positive manifestations of Mercury Neptune, which in Trump's case comes through in a very challenging dynamic. So this is Trump and Pelosi's synastry. A couple things. One thing I just want to point out is that Mars is exactly square Mars. I mean, 1 degree, 26 Leo in Trump's chart to 25 Taurus in Pelosi's chart. So exact square there. And the other thing is that Pelosi's sun energy highlighting, it's highlighting on Trump's Mercury, his delusional mind. So it's she's very focused on his either lies or the very rare truth. So yeah, just wanted to point that out. And then here's for Monday, the impeachment hearings. I mean, the big picture is the Saturn-Pluto conjunction. It's opposite his natal Saturn. This is the karma coming home to roost, the consequences of his actions, demonstrating or highlighting the lack of integrity and the depth of corruption that's taking place relative to his Saturn that I believe, will be continually be called out by the Saturn-Pluto conjunction in the sky opposing his natal Saturn. So a big picture on him. And then finally, I am just incredibly inspired by the amount of women, the strong women who have stood up to the sexual predator President Donald Trump, and starting with Marie Yovanovitch, the ambassador to Ukraine, who did not have to testify, who disobeyed the orders to do just that. And you can see she had sun opposite Mars and moon opposite Mars. That's like Mars giving her the courage to stand up and do what's right. And she's also born with Mercury trine Pluto. Or no, I'm sorry, that's a square. Mercury square Pluto tends to intensify the mind, to be intensely detective-like, where she has an intense mind, but it's the capacity also to speak with depth, to speak with focus, to speak with intensity, and her words carried a lot of power in her testimony. Trump's synastry with Yovanovitch is interesting in that her Saturn is exactly on his moon opposite his sun, and again bringing a consensus reality and a judgment upon his actions, which very possibly will stick. This is interesting. Rudy Giuliani, who is seemingly in a lot of hot water at the moment. What's really interesting about this is that his midpoint between Saturn and Pluto is 16 degrees and 55 minutes Cancer. And if you look at when his henchmen were arrested back in October, the midpoint between Saturn and Pluto is 17 degrees Capricorn, which is exactly opposite the 1655 position of Giuliani's Saturn-Pluto midpoint. So what's taking place? I think Saturn's like at 19 now or whatever, but it's opposing that position in his chart. It's also so you can see where the Saturn-Pluto conjunction in the sky that's bringing about a karmic reckoning for Trump and seemingly Giuliani as well. It's that Saturn-Pluto conjunction is in opposition to his natal Saturn-Pluto midpoint, drawing both of them together. So seems like there's a good bit of information there that could be helpful in understanding what's taking place with the current political situation. Let's see. There's so many other places I could go with this. The last thing I'll end on is that I actually believe that this is a symbol of a much larger transformation, a death rebirth process that Richard Tarnas has written about a, a lot, which I can post later on the rite of passage that the modern mind is going through. And I believe Trump is a very clear symbol of what's dying. It's the hubristic ego that sees itself as separate and superior to nature, superior to women, superior to other races. That part of our identity that was forged, in an important way that carved out a certain individuality and autonomy that everyone is participating in positive ways. It has to humble itself to larger powers. Clearly, the astrological demonstrates that we are participating in powers that are much larger than ourselves, and to move into a relationship with them rather than being victim or controlled or possessed by the unconscious, potentially very shadow to potentialities of them, there's an opportunity for us to see ourselves more clearly, move into a new relationship with the depth of ourselves and the whole as a co-participation. It's a relationship between the depth of ourselves and the whole that can become much more harmonious, rather than these individual egos thinking they're separate from one another and separate from nature, trying to enforce their will upon one another, rather than seeing ourselves as embedded and in a relational dynamic where all have to be sanctioned with the same dignity as we see in ourselves. Okay, long little spiel, could have been said in a bunch of different ways. It's just what came out this morning. Hopefully it's helpful. If you have any questions, please post them below, and we will continue to talk, hopefully sooner rather than later. And I'm sending all holiday love and magic to you, and many blessings. Take care, everyone.